Welcome everybody to our webinar series, Machine Learning for Operational Forecasters. My name is Milana Vučković and I will be your host today. And today with me are Thomas and Meghan, two colleagues who are joining me and who will actually present today. This is the second webinar of the series titled What You Need to Be Aware When Using ECMWF Machine Learning Models. Over the past years, we have organized several webinars around the development of AI models at ECMWF, but they were mainly technical webinars about the models themselves. And in this series, we want to give you more of an operational perspective, what you may need to know as an operational forecaster in order to use machine learning models output effectively. So over the course of these 3 weeks, so last week, this week, and next week, we will take you through a number of different aspects that we think would be helpful to you as an operational forecaster and in using ECMWF forecasts, AI forecast product effectively. So the main goal is to encourage you to use the products, to give you helpful information, and to also encourage you to give us feedback. So when you start using, or if you are already using these products, to give us feedback on how you use it and how well it is working in your areas. If you have any questions during the presentation, during the talk, please put them in the chat and we will try to reply during the talk, and also after the presentation we will pick a few most important or interesting questions to answer at the end. We have also several colleagues here to answer your questions. Also, your comments on the use of machine learning data in your organization are very welcome, and we would like to better understand how you currently use machine learning models. So the first webinar was the introduction to our machine learning models, how and where you can find the graphical products with the machine learning data. And the second webinar will be more about the known issues and more technical details. And also in the second part that Thomas will present, we will have more about verification of AIFS. In the third webinar, that will be next week, but in the afternoon at 2 p.m. British time, we will also present you some case studies from AIFS single and sample. So without any more introduction, that was it. I will give the floor to Meghan, who will do the first part of this presentation.
Thank you, Milana. Does that work okay? Yeah. So hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you all today about the AIFS. For the first half of this presentation, as Milana mentioned, I will recap and go into more detail about some of the topics that were introduced last week, focusing in particular on how to access information and how to work with AIFS data and models. Then for the second half of the webinar, my colleague Thomas will talk through some verification results of the AIFS. And our hope is that this webinar will provide an all-encompassing guide to help you get started using the AIFS. So I'll start with a quick recap on where you can find information and also how you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So we have information about the AIFS in multiple places across our website and our conference pages. So to bring all of this together in one place, I have published a user guide for machine learning activity at the centre. And this will be regularly updated to keep all of the information that you may have together in one place, or that you may need together in one place. Alternatively, if you already know that you only want to follow, say, AIFS model upgrades, or you just want to look at the model weights, for example, you can access this information directly using the QR codes or links on the right. Now, to get support, there are a couple of options. If you have questions or you encounter issues which are not covered by our documentation, we would encourage you to have a look at our user forum in the first instance. So this is our platform for community engagement, and you may find that other users have asked the same question or already raised the same issue. And you can find all of the AIFS content by selecting the AIFS, IFS and Open IFS category. which is a bit of a mouthful. Alternatively, if your inquiry is for a more specific matter, for example, you would like a contract to access data or you're having some issues with our software, then you can reach out to us via our support portal for one-to-one support by ECMWF staff. A final thing to note is that we make the AIFS model weights available to the public through the Hugging Face platform, but this is an external platform that's not fully supported by ECMWF, so we would encourage you not to use this platform and to instead use one of our official channels to receive support. So now that we have covered information and support, I will move on to talk through how you can access AIFS data and use the models. So my colleague Becky provided a really nice summary of the available data last week, so I won't talk in detail about this, but I just want to recap that AIFS single and ensemble forecasts are run 4 times per day, and that output is a 15-day forecast with 6 hourly time steps. The output parameters are nearly identical for both models. However, the ensemble contains some additional post-process products, such as standard deviations, but the ensemble does not yet include a couple of products such as tropical cyclone tracks, which do exist for AIFS single. And you can find more information about the products that are available at the dataset description pages linked above. So now I'm going to talk through how you can access real-time and historical AIFS data. And there are many options for this, and what you can access will depend on who you are. So I will first talk through how you can access our open data, as this is available to everyone. So all of our AIFS data is open, meaning freely available to all users. The data that you can access for free are on a 0.25 degree lat-long grid with global coverage, and you can use ECMWF's open data Python package to facilitate the efficient downloads of the data. You can access data for the past 4 days from ECMWF servers. However, there are also a number of other platforms that host our open data, and some of these have longer retention periods than ECMWF. So just as an example of a few, the Open Meteo platform keeps forecasts for about a fortnight, Microsoft Azure for 1 month, and Amazon's AWS actually has all of the AIFS open data since the models became operational. So if you are looking for historical AIFS open data, do check out these other platforms. So one point to note about open data is that during peak times, when the AIFS forecast has just been produced, the ECMWF server can sometimes reach capacity, so you may encounter errors trying to get the data from here. So we do recommend that you do try and make use of the other platforms, as in addition to having these longer retention periods, they may also have greater bandwidth at peak times. And our open data Python package, again, makes it easy to try these alternatives by simply changing the source in your request. And secondly, I've just provided a quick summary here, but all of the platforms hosting open data are listed on the linked Confluence page. So you may be wondering what the AIFS data looks like if you haven't worked with it yet. So here we have one example file that I'm inspecting using our EC Code software, and the gribls command just provides a nice human-readable summary of the contents of the file. And if we look now at the file name, this tells us some additional information. So in this case, we are looking at an AIFS single file denoted by the opper in the name. And the data are from the 16th of November, and the forecast is time step 6. And then if we look at the gribls summary here, we can see that all the data are in Grib Edition 2 format, and as I mentioned previously, the data are on a regular lat-long grid. Each file also contains all forecast parameters output by the AIFS. But if you are only interested in 1 or 2 specific parameters, the open data package allows you to select just a subset of the data. So you can avoid downloading data that you don't need. So that was just a quick example, but if you're not familiar with Grib files and you would like some guidance using the EC Code software, or if you would like to see what options are possible with the open data package, then I really recommend the linked notebooks, which go through lots of example commands. So now you may or may not want to work with the raw AIFS data, and as an alternative, you can instead visualize AIFS forecasts through our Open Charts platform. Milana gave an excellent demonstration of Open Charts in last week's webinar, but just as a reminder, we make a set of static charts available to the public for free for some of our most popular AIFS products. And in contrast to open data, which is only available with global coverage, our charts can be viewed for 31 sub-areas. And in addition to this, we also provide Jupyter notebooks, so you can also have a go at plotting these plots yourself from our open data. So that was just a brief overview of our freely available AIFS data and products. But one final but important point to note is that although the data are free for all to access, they are made available under a Creative Commons license, which means that you must link to the original data and indicate if you have made any changes to the data. An example attribution is shown here, but we have also just recently posted more details about attribution for open data on our LinkedIn channel, so please do take a look at this if you're planning to use our open data. And now I'd like to move on to discuss other ways to access data if you purchase one of our licenses, or if you are an ECMWF member state, you will have access to these additional options by default. So first we have EC Charts, which is a web service similar to Open Charts. However, it provides some additional functionality. So in particular, the charts are interactive and they can be probed for their data, and users can also create and save custom views of the data. For AIFS in particular, we make more layers or parameters available compared to our open charts, and you can find the full list of layers in the attached link. And finally, as Becky mentioned last week, WMO members have access to one free account per institution. So please check out the link here, and if you do need help accessing your account details, do reach out to us and we will be happy to help. And then finally, we also provide bespoke AIFS products through our real-time catalogue and our archive catalogue. So where AIFS open data are provided on a global grid at 0.25 lat long resolution, through our real-time or archive catalogues, you can request the products for custom areas and custom grid resolutions. And just to note that our real-time data can be disseminated to your servers as soon as the forecast is generated. And for our historical data, this goes back to the date at which the models were implemented. So we have the full history from operational implementation. Accessing the data through either of these channels requires the use of our MARS and dissemination keywords. So in particular, we introduced a new keyword when the AIFS models were released operationally. And this is the model keyword highlighted on this slide. And this model keyword just allows you to differentiate between forecasts from the AIFS single model and AIFS ensemble model. They weren't required in dissemination requests previously, but now they are required for AIFS data. And you can find all other required syntax at the link, which we can also provide assistance with if you need further support. So now that I have covered data access, I will also share some information with you about how you can run the AIFS models yourself. So we store the model checkpoints on the Hugging Face platform, which I mentioned earlier, and this is a community platform for AI. And on Hugging Face, we have also created some example notebooks. So the notebooks take you through each step to generate a forecast. And these steps include first, importing the necessary packages. So the AIFS uses Anemoy inference to generate a forecast. Anemoy inference is just one of our packages that is being co-developed by ECMWF and National Meteorological Services across Europe to build data-driven weather forecast models. The notebook then guides you through retrieving the exact data that you need to initialize the AIFS. So this requires analysis fields from our open data. And these serve as the input conditions for the models to use to then generate a forecast. And then finally, the notebook then loads the model checkpoint from Hugging Face and uses GPUs that are provided in Google Colab to generate the forecast. But there are a couple of important technical details to be aware of if you choose to generate forecasts yourself from the notebook example. So the first is that it will not be possible to produce an identical forecast to our operational AIFS forecast. And this is because our open data, which we use as input to the model in the notebook example, follows a different interpolation pathway compared to our operational analyses. So in the open data case, the data are reprojected from the 0.25 lat long grid to the N320 grid, which the AIFS model needs, whereas our operational analyses are reprojected from their native octahedral 01280 grid to the N320 grid. So if you would like to use ECMWF's operational analyses as input conditions instead of open data, you will need a license for Mars data, and then you can retrieve the data from our archive following the same interpolation pathway. However, another important point to be aware of is that due to the non-determinism of GPUs, this also means that a forecast you generate will not be bit identical to our forecasts. However, they will be skillfully and statistically equivalent, so it is worth having a go at this. And then another point to note is that the AIFS requires the use of the flash attention library, but this library is only supported on NVIDIA and AMD GPUs. And then on that note, if you do require access to GPUs and you're located within an ECMWF member state, you can reach out to your computing representative who can help you to obtain access. So now to finish off, I would like to just address two topics which came up in last week's webinar before I hand over to Thomas. So last week, many of you suggested some additional parameters that you would like to see in future versions of the AIFS. And we're really grateful for this feedback. And so to capture this more officially, we will very soon be creating a thread on our user forum. This will be created just after we issue our official announcement about version 2 of AIFS Single and AIFS ENS. So please do watch the forum for announcements to be notified when the thread is available, and you will then be able to comment on the thread and suggest parameters that you would like to see in future iterations of the AIFS if they're not already included in version 2 of the models. And then the final thing is that some of you inquired about third-party data-driven models. Now, ECMWF does run some third-party models on a daily basis. So this includes models such as Google's GraphCast and Microsoft's Aurora model. And we run these models only for verification purposes for comparison with the AIFS. So we don't make the raw data available to users. But you can view the plots that we generate on open charts, and my colleague Thomas will talk a little more about these next. You can also, again, have a go at generating forecasts yourself with these third-party models through a package that we have created called AI Models. I won't go into detail about this here, but all of the details are provided in our user documentation that I referenced at the beginning of the talk. Okay, so that's it for my part of the talk. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this information helps you to get started with the AIFS. We'd love to see you making use of the data in the models, but if you do need extra information or support, please don't hesitate to let us know. You can comment in the chat now, or you can email me directly. My email is on the title slide, and I look forward to hearing from you. And Thomas, I can hand over to you when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Milana and Meghan. We are now moving to the verification part of this webinar. So this is about verifying the forecasts coming from the AIFS and comparing with the IFS, with our physics-based model, and also comparing to other data-driven models. As Meghan just explained, we have some third-party ML models also being run in-house for verification purposes. Yeah, so as most of you will know by now, we have these two versions of an ML model. We have the AIFS Single and the AIFS Ensemble, and Single we have been running since late February this year, and the Ensemble since beginning of July. And they are trained in different ways, which is sort of symbolized here in the top panels. And you can find all the forecasts coming from these systems in the open charts. And I will start, so a bit more than half of my talk will focus on the forecast performance of the AIFS single on the left-hand side, and then we will move over to the ensemble. So if you have already looked at, for example, at the precipitation fields coming from the AIFS and compared with what the IFS produces, you will see that the AIFS, which is here on the right, produces on average smoother precipitation structures with fewer details, while the IFS gives you more smaller scale structures. And the question is this smaller scale structure actually useful? Does it contain useful information that actually verifies? Definitely it provides more realistic structures at this point, because we know that the actual precipitation distribution is even less smooth than what we see in the IFS. And just to say that what I call here the IFS control forecast, as you see on the left-hand side at the bottom, is what in former times was called the HRS. But now the resolution of the HRS is the same as the ensemble, so we call this the IFS control forecast. And on the right-hand side, we have the IFS single. So let's take it one of the headline scores that we usually use for verifying our precipitation forecast skill. And this is the so-called SEEP score, which measures the ability of a forecast to distinguish between dry, no precipitation, light precipitation, and moderate to heavy precipitation. So it's 3 categories. And this is here shown for the northern extratropics. For the, I think, yeah, this is roughly a half-year season. So it's basically since the AIFS single became operational. And you can see that the skill here is improved noticeably in the AIFS relative to the IFS. And this improvement is equivalent roughly to half a day to 1 day in terms of lead time. So this is basically the horizontal difference between the curves. And we can also see that this benefit increases with lead time. So in the very short range, there's not too much gain here in this metric, but as we go out towards day 10, the gain becomes bigger. So this verifies the overall, let's say, characteristics of the precipitation forecast over all cases. So what if we are interested in the more heavy precipitation, which many of us are, of course. And here, as an example, we show precipitation larger than 30 millimeters in 24 hours. That's a substantial precipitation, still not extreme, but it's a substantial amount. And we use a widely used score, the so-called equitable threat score, that gives us here information about how good we are actually at verifying those larger amounts. And the matrix in the middle in blue and in orange simply gives you so when it's blue, the AIFS is better, and the different columns are the different seasons. So it starts with the winter season. This is the orange one, and then it moves into spring, summer, and autumn. Then we have the full year, and then the rightmost column is the tropics. And you can see there are the most pronounced improvements are actually in the convective season. So in the spring to summer, also still a little bit into the autumn season. And if we look at the hits, misses, and false alarms on the left-hand side, so this is one example where the AIFS is actually a little bit worse than the IFS. We can see that, yeah, we have both a bit more misses and fewer hits, but we have also a lot less false alarms in the AIFS. And this is true also on the right-hand side. So this is the constant between these two plots on the left and on the right is the AIFS has fewer false alarms, but on the right-hand side, you can see it has also more hits and less misses. So that's why overall then in spring and summer, it comes out a bit better. And this is an interesting result, actually, that the improvement seems to be stronger outside the winter season. So maybe it's simply because the IFS in winter, when precipitation is more dominated by synoptic scale structures, fronts, and so forth, maybe it's already so good that it's harder to improve. But anyway, since convective precipitation is one of our big challenges still, this is an interesting result that we have more here in the summertime. And it also is interesting to ask, well, we have this basic skill gap between the precipitation forecast skill in the exotropics and in the tropics. So when you look here on the left at day 2, the skill in the exotropics, and this is again the SEEP score, it undergoes an annual cycle with a drop in summer and an increase in winter. And even in summer, in the exotropics, skill is still higher than it's ever in the tropics. And this is also sort of true at day 5, even though the difference between tropics and exotropics becomes a bit smaller. So this skill gap is, of course, has to do with the way the atmosphere works and the dominance of convective processes in the tropics throughout the year. But the question is, would AI help us to reduce this skill gap? Possibly. So if we put here the AIFS forecast on top in the darker colors, you can see that it's more or less similar to what the IFS is producing here in terms of skill, even though there is a little bit, you could say, more improvement maybe in the tropics, but it's overall, it doesn't reduce the skill gap significantly. We can also see here with the black circles that in March this year, the forecast skill for precipitation increased significantly in the AIFS, and this was a change of the AIFS version, and this coincided with the time at which it was made operational. So let's look at some other parameters: 2 meter temperature, 10 meter wind speed, some classical surface parameters. This is for summer 25 in Europe. And we can here see now in terms of RMSE, how the different machine learning models and the IFS compare. So these are the other models that are being run in-house, and we can see the IFS in red and the AIFS in burgundy, so very dark red. And you can see that the RMSE is smaller in the AIFS than in the IFS, both for 2 meter temperature and 10 meter wind speed. But we can also see there's this orange colored model. This is Aurora, was also mentioned by Meghan. This has even smaller RMSE. And here we start to we need to be careful, because RMSE is obviously one of the metrics that are being used in the machine learning world to optimize and to train the model. And especially for parameters like wind speed that are basically, that can only have positive values that are bounded on the lower side, having a negative bias, like you see here on the bottom, can help with reducing the RMSE. So if we see that RMSE is a lot lower, we also have to look at other things to judge whether this is simply due to, let's say, having lower values, taking less risk in the forecast. So this is obviously what's happening, at least partly here for the Aurora forecast. Yeah, so then let's take a quick look at upper air parameters. So this is the ability of the model to predict the large-scale flow, like 500 hectopascal geopotential, which you see on the isolines here on the right. And this is the most classical headline score measuring this aspect, and this has been used at ECMWF for 40 years now. And on the left, you can again see all those different machine learning models plus the IFS. So the anomaly correlation in the AIFS is definitely a lot better than in the IFS. Again, you have the Aurora model here on top, but when we look at forecast activity, and so this is another quantity that is important to consider when we compare these models, then we can see that Aurora drops down quite a bit compared to the other models in activity. So this measures the standard deviation of the forecast anomaly relative to climatology. And we can see that there are models that are not losing activity and are still beating the IFS. So it's not the full explanation. So there are actually machine learning models that, so to say, have high skill, even though they are not overly smoothing. And this is one way of checking this this effect of having a smoother forecast, but this standard deviation that I'm showing here on the right, it doesn't measure the actual spatial scale. It doesn't tell you, you know, a certain aspect of smoothing is not included here, and that's why we also need to look at spectra. So for example, here you see for day 1 on the left and for day 10 on the right, forecast activity measured by the spectra of 500 hectopascal kinetic energy. And here we can see, let's focus on the left at first. We can see that the AIFS control forecast follows the theoretical line quite nicely up to a scale of, let's say, roughly 100 kilometers, so down to a scale of 100 kilometers, and then starts to drop off at the very small scales, while the AIFS single, being smoother, drops off more quickly, so at larger scales already. And at day 10, this is even more pronounced. Now this drop-off starts even earlier at even larger scales. So roughly it's about 1,000 kilometers at day 1 and 2,000 kilometers at day 10. So this is also something to consider. The flip side of this smoothness is actually a positive aspect. This is jumpiness, a reduction of jumpiness. So the way we measure jumpiness here, what we mean is some sort of flip-flopping behavior where you have on the left-hand side the ideal approach, let's say, where you have at day 4 a certain forecast error, Y4, and then it reduces smoothly until you get to the analysis or the observation. While on the right-hand side, you have a reduction of the forecast error, then an increase again, and a reduction again. So it's not the smoothest way to approach the actual verifying analysis of forecast. And this is, of course, something that is annoying when you're using the forecast as a forecaster. So with this quantification, we can then compare the AIFS control forecast and the AIFS single. And these are the top 2 curves here. And we can see that AIFS is about 15% less jumpy than the AIFS. And when you might think, okay, this is maybe simply a similar effect, like if we are looking at the ensemble mean, and then for that reason, I've also put the ensemble mean here, and you can see that we are still far from the ensemble mean in terms of this jumpiness, and also in terms of the smoothness, of course. And interestingly, all 3 are quite similar up to day 3. So it's only after that, after day 4 and 5, that these curves, this jumpiness begins to diverge. Another interesting question is, one way of improving the forecast is, of course, running physics-based models at higher resolution. How do these improvements compare to the kind of improvement we get from the AIFS? And in these plots here, you can see in the 0 line represents our operational 9-kilometer forecast, while the blue AIFS line represents the 4.4 kilometer experimental AIFS that is run in the Destiny project. And all the curves that are below the 0 line show improved forecast reduction of RMSE. And this is for 2-meter temperature in summer at the top and in winter at the bottom. And we can see here, for example, in the middle, which is for the flat areas, that the AIFS improvement from the high resolution is minimal, or it's really neutral, while the AIFS in those flat areas gives us large improvements on the order of 5 to 10, even 15%, depending on the time of day. While in more complex areas, not surprisingly, because the AIFS is here still on lower resolution, we get more competitive behavior. For example, on the bottom here on the right, you can see December, January, February, AIFS and high resolution give ballpark-wise roughly the same kind of improvement. While on the top, you can see the AIFS here has still some issues, not improving the forecast really at all times here in the summertime in the complex areas. Okay, and as promised, we are now moving over to the AIFS ensemble, which has only been operational for a few months now. But again, if we start with the kind of picture that I showed at the beginning, and this, by the way, is the precipitation that is falling right now. So this is the 6 hours between 6 UTC and 12 UTC this morning in a 5-day forecast. You can see, well, you can check if you are somewhere located on this map, which one is better. For example, I can see that here in the Mediterranean area, there are major differences between AIFS and the AIFS. But the main point I want to make here is the difference in smoothness is not as obvious as it was for the AIFS single. So the AIFS ensemble, if you take the control forecast or other individual members, does not look as smooth and is not as smooth as the AIFS single. And this is basically due to the way it can be trained, the way the metric to minimize its errors is CRPS. And that in this way, we are not training the model to be as smooth as possible. And we can also see this when we look at a spectrum again. So this is now AIFS ensemble versus AIFS single. And you can see the AIFS ensemble spectrum. This is the green curves, which are on top of each other. So you just see one green curve. So this is for day 1 and day 10. Both are on top of each other. You can see that they are really following a straight line, and the AIFS single drops off depending on the lead time. So orange for day 1 and purple for day 10 drops off a bit more strongly. So this is also a different characteristic of the AIFS ensemble, that it does not lose activity with lead time. Yeah, again, what does it look like if you try to predict the large-scale flow? So let's first use the ensemble in a deterministic way, which means we are using the ensemble mean. And this is the verification for this. This is, again, the anomaly correlation of the ensemble mean. And if we start from the bottom, we have the AIFS control forecast and the AIFS single. So those are individual representations, single representations. And then we have the mean. Of course, in the mean, you still keep much higher anomaly correlation out even into week 2. This is here going out to day 15. And the AIFS ensemble mean gives you, again, a little bit of edge over the AIFS ensemble mean. Difference is not quite as big as for the 2 single forecasts, but it's still quite noticeable. And in order to not having to show you all the different individual plots like the one I just showed here, a summary in form of a scorecard for the AIFS ensemble. So this scorecard compares the AIFS ensemble with the AIFS ensemble. And just to explain, on the left-hand side, you have in the left half, you have the northern extratropics, and on the right-hand side, you have the tropics. And everything that is blue is an improvement. If it's darker blue, it's highly significant, and it's usually on the order of 5 to 10%. And the top part is verification against analysis, and the lower part is against observations. And you can see that in almost all parameters, levels, etc., we have quite a bit of improvement. There are at 100 hectopascal, which is every 4th line, basically in the stratosphere, we have some degradations. So this is something that can be resolved. This is actually something that depends on the training. And if I blank out those, then it's a bit easier to see the actual tropospheric red parts here. And yeah, we can see that in the upper part, we have at day 1 and sometimes day 2, we have still some red signals here. So this is verification against analysis. While against observations, there is no such red parts on day 1. So it's really something to do with the better match of the AIFS to its own analysis. But overall, we can see that, yeah, it's almost everywhere. It's quite a big improvement. And the violet and green colors are simply showing the spread. So violet means increased spread, green means reduced spread. It's just an additional information regarding the comparison AIFS versus AIFS. If we take out here 2 things relevant for forecasting for surface, so this is 2-meter temperature and 24-hour precipitation, and take a closer look at that. So what does it mean really here? So this is now the CRPS S, so the continuous rank probability skill score for 2-meter temperature for July, October 25 in the extratropics. And on purpose, I've scaled the y-axis here in a way that we have 0 here at the bottom, no skill above climatology, and we have 1, the maximum attainable perfect skill. This would only happen in an ideal world, basically, because this is verification against observation. So in reality, we will not quite reach that 1 ever due to various reasons. But It's something that shows you where we are in this total range. And we can see that the skill increase is 15%, which is massive here from the AIFS ensemble, and it's still 5% out of the total range. So this is what I mean here on the right when I say, okay, it's a large relative increase in skill. What does it mean in practice? So as a forecaster or as a user of the forecast, what do you really feel when you now use these forecasts? How much is it better? And I think because these 15% improvement are relative to the 0.3 something skill that it already has, and it's more like these 5%, but 5% is a really big improvement. 5% of the total range means we got 5% closer, so to say, on this scale. And this is probably more what it feels like when you're using the forecast. And similar here for the precipitation, it's a bit less. So the skill is less overall. Again, this is verification really against SYNOP observations. And the skill starts with about 0.3, 0.4 here at day 1, and then it drops about 0.2 at day 5. And we have, again, a roughly 15% relative increase, and this corresponds to 3% of the total range. So this is definitely bigger than the usual, let's say, what a model upgrade in the physics-based model brings. Some concluding remarks. So I think the main message is ML forecasts indeed bring substantial improvements. We can measure this in various ways. We can see this by looking at the means, at the more extreme precipitation and other parameters. So this really goes throughout the metrics, throughout the parameters. We have to be careful since those machine learning models are designed to minimize the RMSE and CRPS. So when we use these metrics to verify it, then we need to be aware of that. And that's why we also should look at results from categorical verification like the ETS or other quantities like I showed. It's also important to check the forecast activity and spectra. If a model has especially low RMSE, the first thing to look is it really because it's smooth? On the plus side, ML forecasts are usually less jumpy. So that's something really useful for doing some medium range forecasts. And for forecasting extremes, it's a more, let's say, complex answer at the moment, at least. I would say it still depends on the parameter. So for precipitation, it looks pretty good. Now, for wind, maybe not that good. You will hear more about this in the webinar 3. And also, of course, you're aware of this, but we need to keep in mind that machine learning forecasts lack some of the physical consistencies that are built into the physics-based models simply by the equations that are used. And for those, especially for those last 2 points, I would really like to advertise the next webinar next week that will be held by Linus Magnusson, talking about case studies. And this is my last slide, just to summarize what other verification resources and links we have. So there's the ECMWF open charts page you already know by now. Be aware that it only contains verification on the AIFS single at this point, and the AIFS ensemble still has to be added. Then we have, each year we have a publication in our ECMWF Tech Memo series. Historically, the main focus of this was, of course, the IFS, but now we include more and more AIFS material. And then thirdly, we have the AIFS blog, where you will typically find things like more in-depth evaluations and also case studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and also thanks Meghan for your presentation as well, and thank you both and everybody else who was answering the questions during the presentations. There was quite a lot of questions, quite a lot of interest. So I will pick up a few questions that maybe 2 of you can answer, or there's. But before I pick up that, I just want to remind everybody that this is being recorded, and then that we will publish the recording both from the last one and this webinar and the next one on YouTube. But give us a couple of days because our colleagues who are editing the webinars are extremely busy. So we will upload them as soon as we know. Also, so there was the question that I wanted to ask to Thomas, but Linus already answered.
Thanks, Linus.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we don't have unanswered questions. If some pop up, I will read them. Oh, there is one. The skill increased for precipitation is also included in is the skill increased for precipitation also included in point-based forecasts or meteograms?
Yes, it should be, because what I showed was the improvement from seen in the verification against observations. So this is really verification against point observations. So it should reflect in the EPS gram, in the ensemble meteogram.
Thank you. Somebody wants a training link for time series machine learning. Meghan, do you know if we have that?
I'm just having a look. I'll share something in the chat if I can find some training materials. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we have answered all of the questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Meghan and Thomas. And don't forget to join our third webinar next week or next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, the webinar will be in the afternoon. So it will be at 1 second, so I don't make a mistake. So 2 p.m. UTC or 3 p.m. Central European time. I will in a moment pop up the link. So if anybody didn't register and would like to attend, so I put a link to register in the chat. You still have the time. The registration will close next week Monday, so a day before. So yep. Thank you very much and see you all next week.